Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Hey Sister. Well, and sister, we got a mister with us this
We
evening,
have a
right?
mister tonight. Yes.
How you doing, sister?
I'm well, sister. How are you doing?
I am doing great, and I'm doing great. So, in typical Hey Sister fashion, we ask that you all like, follow, share, subscribe, share this broadcast with your community because we got a real doozy of a conversation coming up. Also, join the conversation in the comments. We want you to be involved in our discussion this evening. And don't forget to check out our new website, heysister.com. Check out the website, get you some merch and all that good stuff.
Yes.
So, yes. Hey, Eric.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm excited for the conversation.
We too are very excited for this conversation this evening. We know that people can be in many different places, but we hope that they'll be here tonight for Hey Sister, or if they watch it in the replay, get some of that goodness that we have to share and that you have to share.
Yeah.
So normally we would dive right into hot topics, but since we have you here, I want you to tell us a little about who you are and what you do, and a little bit about your story, because you said you want to get in on these hot topics tonight. So,
Yeah, I do. I'm excited to get into the hot topics. Again, just thank you very much for having me here tonight. My story, real quick, started off actually in the seventh grade. I was living in Ecuador at that time. My family had just moved from the United States to Ecuador, and my school had opened up its very first computer lab. And we were the first class that had opportunity to go and experience what it was like to have technology and the internet around us. And I remember vividly that experience of not only using technology for me to experience a new part of the world, but for me to feel reconnected to the world. And when I had that experience, I just knew I wanted to figure out a way to use technology for good. And it so happens that my career eventually progressed. I went into engineering school, got an engineering degree in Houston. Then I had a chance to work in New Orleans, where we probably also crossed paths between our families, having worked in New Orleans and the oil and gas industry. And then eventually had a chance to work in the tech sector. And in all those spaces, I started asking myself the question. I was like, wow, technology is moving super fast. But what does it mean for us to be engaged in our communities, to better prepare our communities to be engaged in these conversations around where technology is moving and how technology is moving and how is it impacting us?
mhm.
And now I am a speaker and a consultant. I work with organizations and I speak at conferences around the future of the human experience. And really the thought process behind that is I believe that as the world is getting more digitized, it gives us a unique opportunity to also expand our human experience and our human condition. But it comes with work too.
Mhm.
And so that's where I get really excited to not only have these conversations, but also work with organizations to help, in this world that's moving extremely fast.
Oh wow. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I love that you found that passion early and got engaged and involved in it right away, and with an intent of making the human experience better. Because I don't think that's everybody's motivation in technology. Now, that's another conversation for another day. Because there's somebody who has this company that a lot of people bought those cars, but I don't know if that's his intentions. But I'm gonna leave that over there. Leave that to the side for right now. Well, tonight, y'all, listen. Hot topics, hot topics,
Well,
hot.
sister, before you jump into the hot topic,
Oh, because I
one
was, I
thing I
mean,
want to
because
say.
because I want Eric to chime in on these, and then we're gonna get
Yeah, no,
back
no,
to the
no.
human
Eric
experience. Yes.
absolutely will chime in on it, but I have to say this. What Eric didn't say is that we cross paths actually in the workplace. He and I used to
Yeah.
work together. And one of the things, I didn't know if we were going to get into his full bio or anything like that. But one of the things that always stood out to me is that he's just a really kind person. And so when he's talking about the future of the human experience, and humanity overall, I just feel like it is such a perfect fit for who he is because he's just a kind and good human being. And I have enjoyed knowing him over the past 7 or so years that we met each other and just started off with just saying hello passing each other in the hallway. And then when we ended up on the same team or in the same group, sitting across from each other and talking every day, always has a smile on his face. And like I said, just a good, kind-hearted person. So I feel like when we talk about a human experience, unlike myself, God is still working on me. I think that Eric is one of those really good human beings that we should see as an example of how to be a good human.
Okay. Well,
Thank you so much, Christina. I hope my mom is watching. I hope my parents are watching.
Yes, Mom. Are you there? I love that. And because we need more good human beings out there. I mean, we all are works in progress, right? So it's not like
Absolutely.
we're not all works in progress, but we need more human first, right? Humanity first. Our shared humanity first. In how we operate business and how we approach our daily living and all of those good things. So yeah. All right. I don't even know if I won't go to these topics now, but
We
South
got this.
Carolina, South Carolina, South Carolina, South Carolina, the Low Country just had the Republican presidential primary, and Nikki Haley, which we already knew, everything showed was not going to win her home state. She is a two-time governor, was that governor of that state twice, 2 terms, and she lost by over 20 points in this primary. Now, I have to go back and look at the actual number of people who voted, because we know that a lot of these primaries, not a lot of people vote. And I think that is just so very important and instructive that participation points matter in elections, people. If more people participate, the better chances we have. Anyway, and not saying that I would support her either. But we have a little video of some of the things that one Mr. Donald John Trump said specifically about the blacks. Now, Eric, I don't know if how you identify ethnically in your category, but my sister and I, we identify with the blacks. But I'm a black. Well, production assistant, can you run that video for us? Put it up, and yeah, let's listen to what this person said.
So bright in my eyes that I can't see too many people out there, but I can only see the black ones. I can't see any white ones. You see, that's how far I've come. That's how far I've come. But I got indicted for nothing, for something that is nothing. They were doing it because it's election interference. And then I got indicted a second time and a third time and a fourth time. And a lot of people said that that's why the black people like me, because they have been hurt so badly and discriminated against. And they actually viewed me as I'm being discriminated against. It's been pretty amazing, but it possibly, I don't know, maybe there's something there. Black conservatives understand better than most that some of the greatest evils in our nation's history have come from corrupt systems that try to target and subjugate others to deny them their freedom and to deny them their rights. You understand that? I think that's why the black people are so much on my side now, because they see what's happening to me happens to them. Does that make sense? The mugshot, we've all seen the mugshot. And you know who embraced it more than anybody else? The black population. It's incredible. You see black people walking around with my mugshot. You know, they do shirts and they sell them for $19 a piece. It's pretty amazing. Millions, by the way, millions of these things have been sold. So I don't know if I'm proud of it or not proud of it, but
I ain't saying nothing. I'm gonna let you take that first, sister.
Well,
you know I got something to say.
You're a part of the black delegation. I'm wondering, did you order yourself a $19 t-shirt? Because I have literally seen no one with this t-shirt. And I don't know a lot of black people, but I know a lot of black people. I've literally seen not one black person with this t-shirt on. Look, at the end of the day, it's the absurdity of it all, but it speaks to where we are where people are saying the quiet parts out loud now. It's just like I'm not even trying to sugarcoat it. I see you as a criminal. And I, unlike you, I have been falsely accused and wrongly accused of doing things, but you can relate to that because you too have been through the system, and the system is not just. Now, mind you, again, he forgets that he took out a full page ad against 5 teenagers in New York who were exonerated, but spent actual jail time. You haven't even spent jail time, and you think you relate to the plight of Black people?
Let's go back to the 70s when he wouldn't when they
wouldn't allow them to stay in
their building or rent, and there was a whole discrimination suit against. Yeah, let's talk about that.
But the unfortunate piece, though, Donald Trump's. So I don't expect anything else from him. The unfortunate piece is the mental gymnastics that I see Black folks performing in order to justify these sort of comments. Mm-hmm. I have read all manner of, but he used to be in all the rappers' videos, and they referenced him in the songs. Okay, like you said, I don't relate to indictments because I've never been indicted. Mm-hmm. I don't relate to mugshots because I don't have a mugshot.
Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, Eric, you got mugshots over there? I don't know about you.
I don't, but I actually did have an experience when I was a teenager, actually in New York, and I was actually held at gunpoint with some cops. This was in the 90s, and I remember sharing that story for several years, and folks would just laugh about it. They're like, "Oh yeah, you were just confused," or they just confused you. And then I remember years later when I started sharing with my Black friends, actually when I moved back to the United States. And they're like, "Man, you could have absolutely had a completely different experience. Like you could have been killed." Mm-hmm. And that just didn't resonate with me. I was like, "What do you mean?" And they started explaining to me their experiences. And I was like, wow, like this is not something that just happens, when we start having social media and we understand, oh yeah, these are the experiences that our communities are having. This has been happening for years, if not decades already, right? It's just part of our history and how we've been treating each other. And I remember that moment just shocked me. And that just gives me a completely different perspective on that experience that I had, just that moment. And so sometimes it goes back to, I think what we've been talking about, even just in this podcast, in this series, is that we have these conversations so we can better understand, yes. Right? We can better understand each other. And I think, to your point, Christina, too, is like, I don't think Trump is having this conversation to relate to new voters. I think he's just trying to relate to the voters that have been supporting him for some time, and that completely support him regardless of what's coming next out of his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna go on to the next hot topic, but I do want to say this: that every time he has an audience, I'm always wondering who are those people in that audience that will listen, consume, and as you said, go through any number of series of mental gymnastics, or you can hear the laughter is often uncomfortable laughter.
Yes.
Because they know that it's not right. They know that it's wrong. They know that it's dehumanizing. They know that it is demoralizing. They know that it is dismissive. They know that it is degrading. All of those things. They know that, and they listen, and then convince themselves that that's not what it really means, and he's gonna do something else. And that's the part that is scary. That's the part that is concerning. And that's the part that I really need people to understand, that This is going to be another binary choice, whether we like it or not, who those candidates are on either side. Third party candidates, stop it. They're not on the ballot in every state. They're not, you have two choices. And we are getting closer. So I don't know. We're getting closer and closer to really blowing this thing up. And we can see the laws that are happening. Like we are getting closer and closer to losing our humanity, because there was a time when our humanity was legislated that we were not human.
Well, we will get back to that when we have this other conversation about Alabama. But one of the things that I did want to say, Eric and I were talking earlier, and the question, he posed to me was, and so why do I think that Nikki Haley's in it and still in it? And she did say she was going to stay in the race. I think that she's still in it because she still has money to be in it. And so as long as she has big funders behind her, big donors behind her, she'll be in there. I think, Dimitri, you and I talked about it. Maybe she's hoping that one of these indictments is going to turn into some actual conviction and jail time. And it will, although you can be in jail and still be the president, apparently, of the United States. So I don't know that that's necessarily a strategy either. But I think it's interesting that, like you said, you wonder about who's in the room. I wonder the conversation she has with herself, because if the U.S. is not a racist country, as she has said it is not a racist country, if that is true, why does she think that she would be losing when she's clearly more educated, has more government experience, has worked on multiple levels, right? Federal, state, local, what have you. Why would she think that she would be losing like badly? Mm-hmm. So I don't know, Eric, if you wanted to give your thoughts about why you think she's still in it.
Yeah, I mean, it is surprising. I think, I agree with the donor perspective too. I also try to play out like what is the end game that they have too, right? I think Newsom is the same thing. Newsom is traveling seems like all the time to New York to give interviews. I'm like, aren't you like the governor of California? Like how are you doing this all the time? But he does it. And it's clearly a 2028 positioning. And so that's the one thing that occurs to me. It's like Nikki just has to be playing this out to maybe if Trump does lose in November, she'll be like, I told you. I should have been the candidate, and she's in position. She'll be first in line potentially. And I don't know I'm assuming that's
not in that party.
But
she needs to. Yeah. She is gonna learn like Piyush Jindal learned in the state of Louisiana. It ain't you, boo. I'm sorry, not in that party. Now they have a new party. If they have a new party, maybe. But in the current structure of what is now the Republican Party, no. And it's so very interesting as we watch the evolution of these parties in these party system. I just recently finished watching the series, Genius series MLK-X about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And that time when the Black people and Martin King Sr. was like, well, when Nixon becomes president, because they were Republicans, right? Black people were Republicans because of Lincoln. And how when Coretta called her friend, the Senator Kennedy, and how that from that point forward, he got Martin Luther King released out of prison, out of jail. And it was like, from that point on, Black people became Democrats, right? So just kind of these cycles. And that was the same time then. And then after that, then Strom Thurmond left the Democratic Party and became a Republican, right? Because they were like, well, Johnson is going to lose the South forever, right? And so you watch these cycles. The way it's currently constructed, she's not going to win in that party. Now, if there's a flip, maybe. We'll see what happens. I don't know. But we got to talk about these country Bamas. We got to talk about these country mamas in Alabama. The senator from Alabama who didn't even know what they, because we need to have more babies. Y'all need to have more babies, but this ruling that you just did about IVF, they're not going to be able to have more babies. Oh, well, I'm going to have to look at, sir, you are a U.S. senator. Actually, you should just go back to the football field because that's where they should have left you. But again, elections have consequences. This is who they chose. They chose someone who is not well versed or even up on the topics that he is legislating and impacting, because he's a senator, impacting all of our lives.
Right.
And so in Alabama, they recently had a ruling. We dropped the article in there regarding IVF, and that if you could drop that quote in from the Chief Justice saying that embryos are human beings, they're babies. And one Nikki Haley said she agreed with that. And now she's been backpedaling and whatever all week trying to like rephrase it, And it's like, no, but you said it and you knew that was wrong. And so now, where do we stand? And so you had an interesting position as we were talking in the pre-show, Eric, about, because this relates to technology and the human experience, right? Because IVF is a whole technological, scientific advancement that people don't even understand and have language for. I remember when Nancy Reagan was against stem cell research until her husband got Alzheimer's. And then it was like, yes, those embryos y'all not using, test away, please. Let's find a cure, right? What are we going to do with these country mamas? And they're stripping education. It's like, y'all don't even know science, basic science. Like, this thing hasn't even gone through the mitosis and meiosis process and has formed into nothing. None of that has happened. I'm sorry. It's too much for me. It's too much. It's too much. It's too much.
So Eric, my
So,
sister,
you want me to go? Okay.
I'm having an emotional thing. I'm sorry, Eric.
That's okay. So the conversation we were having was that what's been interesting has been even seeing the commentaries around this, right? Saying, hey, you know what? The Supreme Court of Alabama interpreted the law correctly, but we probably need to revisit what the implications of this law is, right? It's a way of also saying, hey, you know what? When this law was implemented, more than likely, the science that was in place at that time was not the science that we have today. And we see that in a lot of legislation, unfortunately, today, right? That we have legislation that was implemented with a certain perspective of either where the world was or where the world was going. And at the rate that technology is moving today, which is at an exponential rate, how you prepare our communities to have the right legislation to not only, in certain cases, yes, protect the communities, but also support them and help them thrive to really enhance the human experience. That's really what matters. And so it's clear to me that the laws that were in place here were just laws that were more than likely implemented decades ago, before even a scenario like this was even considered. It was probably science fiction for many folks. And that's just the world that we live in today for folks that were more than likely legislating 30, 40 years ago.
But the quote from the Chief Justice, then y'all help me understand, about even before birth, all human beings have the image of God and their lives cannot be destroyed without effacing his glory. And I was like, I thought we had separation of church and state.
Yes. Yes.
And this is the Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court. Now, I'm sure this is going to go on, but we already know what our Supreme Court has ruled about the Dobbs decision that they made overturning Roe v. Wade, which has now caused a cascade of ripple effects of women who have been having any number of medical emergencies as a result, and not being able to, if they need a medical termination, if they need a DNC, if they need any type of procedure to save their lives, they've not been able to get them, or they're waiting to be so sick that then they have to be hospitalized and then put their fertility at jeopardy. It's like the insanity of this all is just It's frustrating. And it only is around women's health that we have so many laws. Like at this point, the sperm should be I mean, why is not the sperm viable? Why don't we protect sperms? You know? Well,
Well, this is what I'll say. Eric tied it to the human experience, so I'll just try to think about it from that perspective. It's easy, obviously, for me to get to have a lot of emotions around this because I don't have children, and now I'm in a place where it's like, probably like if I ever wanted to, I'm probably not even in a position to do so because of these sort of laws that are populating and percolating up. It would make it very difficult, a woman of my age, if you will, to be able to have a child without the potential consequence of being jailed, because if I needed IVF, for example, and a procedure doesn't take, or like you said, this is not an exact science thing. So I think from the human experience aspect, I am challenged because I don't have a science degree, unlike you, Demetria. I don't have a science degree. Eric and I are engineers.
You have engineering degrees. That's
I have an engineering degree, slightly different. I don't have a biology degree. You have a biology degree. I'm civil engineering. Definitely roads, different situation, right? But just in my basic understanding, embryos have to be frozen to live. Babies die if they're frozen. Fetuses and embryos have to be implanted into the womb, or embryos are implanted in the womb, become fetuses or what have you, in order to live. A baby can't live in the womb because once it comes out, it is over. You can't. That's done. So for me, it's some of these basic definitions that I'm challenged with. How are we calling, like you said, cells that have not all the way formed? How are we now referring to those as children? And how do we, from a law perspective, like I just read a meme, African Americans in this country were once considered 3/5 human. So how is it that now an embryo has more rights than a full-grown African American person had at a point in this history? And dare I say, maybe even now. And how is it that we have so many different things that are challenging our children's ability to grow up and grow old in this country, like gun laws, for example? If this is about children, or if this is about human beings, how is it then that we are willing to allow human beings to suffer so greatly when they're outside of the womb or when they're outside of a freezer? I don't get that. That's why it doesn't make sense to me.
Let me just share this image because I just feel like this is so very important. Because this is how it go. You see right here? You see them little sperm fighting to get in there?
Right.
Once one hit it, the rest, the shield forms. Here. You see all these, because again, this is the cells. Boom, 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 boom. Then we hear, this is about where they freeze it, right about here, where it says blastocyst. This is what's frozen. That's what gets implanted. Those cells. And those cells get implanted into a uterus, and they may or may not go on to become a fetus. And so what they're saying is that this thing right here, this clump of cells is a human. Viability is about 20-24 weeks. We got some people who babies about 21, 22. If a baby's usually born at that time, it's very, very precarious whether they'll make it. About 24 weeks, many make it, and they make it because of technology, because it have had such advances in the science.
Not only that, Dimitri, but I'm really interested to kind of even learn how we learned about the science behind this, right? So as science started evolving, we started having a better understanding of the formation of the human beings. Like, how does it continue to grow in the mother's body, right? And so and I'm sure there's even exponentially more things that we'll be learning over the next 50 years about this process as well. And so honoring even that expectation as well, I think also recognizing that, hey, sometimes when we create these laws, or even when we have conversations about even the religious implications or the religious perspectives, when we implement some of these laws, recognizing that some of these religious perspectives also were more than likely either popularized or implemented or taught at a time that there was probably a different understanding from a science perspective and from a technology perspective of what how do we grow? How does the science work? And so part of it is also just education, having these conversations about, hey, how does this technology work today? Where can it possibly go tomorrow? And then, yes, let's have these open conversations around our religious beliefs around this as well. That's fine. We can have conversations. It's another thing to legislate on those as well.
Right. But it's also another thing to legislate when we have more people who are atheists and agnostic now in this country than ever before. And the faith in the God that he's speaking of is not the same God that many people, billions of people in this world practice. So,
well,
and also recognizing that this is an Alabama law, right? So also recognizing that there's some boundary conditions created also around the space on who this law particularly serves. Now, I agree, it could eventually be used as a case study for other states to follow, but in this perspective, it'll be interesting to even see the Alabama.
But I see that I see again with the 15 weeks down to 6 weeks, these abortion bans. It was like as one state did it, then they all started coming. This is why local elections, your state representatives, your governors, that's why they have a huge impact. And those are the elections you really need to be looking at, because laws are being made in your state.
Yeah.
And that if you are a woman in a certain state and you become pregnant, your life is imperiled at this point in time. You have
the
no
crazy
idea.
thing is your life is already imperiled. That's what people also seem to forget.
Yeah, because pregnancy puts your life in peril.
Pregnancy is not an easy thing from the beginning. So that's what people seem to
and we saw all of those stages. Most pregnancies in one of those stages all the way up before it get, because they tell you like we gonna see you like 8-12 weeks. Don't even come in here till you like 8 weeks. Don't even come into my office until it's been at least 8 weeks. And that's kind of how it is, because most of them don't make it.
Well, one of the things that
I'm
Eric
sorry, we going down.
No, one of the things is we can transition to the next topic. One of the things we were just talking about earlier is about taking action. And, as the old saying goes, when you know better, you're supposed to do better. Then this is a time where we have all this technology around us. This is an opportunity for us to get outside of ourselves and our personal experiences and think about the overall human experience. I've never met a woman, and I know a few, but I've never met a woman who's either had to go through IVF or some kind of fertility, or had fertility issues, who didn't want that to be successful. And who wasn't happy if they just had one viable egg. And I don't know anybody who's ever had to have an abortion, or who had an abortion, or who had a spontaneous abortion, i.e. a miscarriage, that they did it as a form of birth control. I just do not know these women. And so for me, it is understanding that pregnancy is hard in and of itself. When you add these additional layers to it, mothers or those who desire to be mothers, it's hard enough. We really should not be adding these. This is a healthcare issue, and healthcare issues should be between the individual and their doctor.
Absolutely.
The people
Absolutely.
who studied science, not the people who went to law school.
hmm All right, we got a question here. Do you think science and
Oh.
technology to improve the human experience will ever reach its potential in our society that at times is governed not by science but beliefs?
By the
Great
way,
questions, Jaime.
Another wonderful person that I used to work with who, like Eric,
All
is
right.
always very happy and joyful and kind. Okay, continue.
Love it.
It's a great question, Jaime. It's yes. I don't know. Eric, I'm gonna toss that question to you first.
Sure, I'll get started. Well, nice to meet you, Jaime. Well, first of all, one of the conversations I like to have too is the worst that the technology experience will be is today, right? If we're thoughtful about, hey, you know what, when we'll talk about some technology blunders in one of the hot topics that are coming up, but again, the promise of it is that it will get better in time, right? As we continue to test it out, as we continue to understand the implications of it. And so that's always been the promise of technology. Now, when it comes to a legislation perspective, I agree with you. I think our legislation system also to a certain extent is challenged because it thinks also it has very short-term incentives. And when you talk about the impact of technology, it has very long-term impacts, right? We were talking about right now about healthcare. Google's been working with AlphaFold, which is this really interesting technology that uses artificial intelligence to understand the genome sequences. And they've like progressed exponentially over the last 5 years.
Mhm.
And it was just like the science fiction type of idea over a decade ago. And so you could foresee potentially the foresight, inside of it could be that medicine could be much more personalized
Mhm.
in the near future. Because today medicine is basically created for a bell curve, right?
Mhm.
It's like, okay, well, this is the range of folks that we're aiming for. This is the range of the conditions that we're going to have. And therefore, to maximize the volume that we're going to have, this is exactly where we need to go. And of course, there's tests and everything that needs to be done. Absolutely. But my body is very different to someone else's body, even though we might have the same age, we're in the same area, and what have you, right? So our human experience is also very unique. And so the problem is that as science and technology continue to evolve, is that it gives us an opportunity to have more personalized experiences. With that said, it doesn't mean that it's easy either, right? But we still need to be very thoughtful of it and understand, hey, what information we're willing to share to have these personalized experiences. That's the first thing. But two, let's understand, even from a legislation perspective, how is this impacting me locally? How's this impacting me in the country I'm in? We're streaming today. Someone from another country could be watching us and they have a completely different experience, just simply because of the boundary conditions that, again, from a legislation perspective, and I think even Jaime is saying that, it's based on beliefs. Even to a certain extent, the borders that we create are just beliefs. We've believed
Yeah.
at one time and we said they exist, and therefore we created those boundary conditions between our humanity, right? But what technology is showing us that in time, it gives us an opportunity to have a democratized human experience, which means all three of us could connect anytime on Sunday night to have a conversation with all of you, right? What simply gives us the opportunity to do that is internet connectivity.
Mhm.
30 years ago, that would have been impossible. And so I could just imagine 30 years from now, what does that look like when it comes to the promise of what the human experience could be?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, for me, Jaime, back to your question, our society is not governed by science, but beliefs. And that one of the challenges we have in our country, and so me, as I work as a coach in coaching, I always ask people about where was this belief born? Like, where did you get your belief from? And if we are not able to challenge our beliefs, or where our beliefs come from, and if we're not able to pressure test our beliefs against science or facts, then we are where we are right now, where things are going backwards, where now measles are popping up, polio is popping up, like these things that were settled science that yes, vaccines are a good thing because they prevent these illnesses. And yes, oh, some people are like, oh, well, it's not that bad. It's not that bad until your child dies from that illness. It's not that bad but your child will come in and infect my child. So your child might be fine, but my child might be one who has a compromised immune system who won't make it. And so because of your beliefs, you've impacted mine. There was something about the greater good, and that was supposed to be a part of this human experiment that we have, that we call the United States of America, where we did things to impact the greater good and not just the individual good. And I see more and more us going backwards about my individual beliefs trumps, for lack of a better term, but trumps everybody else who I come in contact with. And we have to stop that. Like, when did that start? Like, we have to stop that, because are we in this society together or are we not? Because this whole rugged individualism was always a lie. We've never been individuals. We've always been a part of a system. That's how humans work. We're a part of a system. We're social beings. We're social creatures. We're connected, whether we want to be or not. So I don't know. And so I don't know how we get back to a place where we challenge belief, where we pressure test our belief, where we update our beliefs, right? Because so many people are stuck in belief systems that are antiquated and they no longer serve us. My thought.
Christina, do you have a quick thought? Because I wanted to share something real quick. But
no, I want you to go on ahead and share. My sister gets on a roll and she rolls.
Okay, we're good.
I'm sorry. I get.
No, this is great. So it helped me remember this one story I had with. I also have an opportunity to work with several education institutions, and I was working with the dean one time, and the dean was telling me, he's like, Eric, I would really like to innovate in our college, and it's just really hard. And I was like, well, let's dive into it. Going back to your point, right? It's like, hey, what is it making it hard? Like, why do you believe it's hard, right? And I was like, you're the dean. Like, you just report to the president of the university. Like, you can make the changes you want to make. Like, help me understand, why is this so difficult? And he says, well, it's just that the professors are really struggling with the change, and they just don't find, the incentive system to really change. I was like, well, why is that? Like, where does that come from? It's like, well, it comes from tenure. Like most of our professors are tenured. And they just, it struggles for them to really take those different leaps and those different risks. That's for a separate conversation. But let's just say that's where he was at. I was like, okay, well, why do you have tenure professors in the university? Like, why does that exist? And it's like, well, there's some history behind that, but at the end of the day, I was like, well, what if you don't have tenure? What does that mean? He's like, well, if I don't have tenure, I don't have certification for my college. I was like, well, what happens if you don't have certification in your college? It's like, if I don't get certification in my college, then therefore my students can't get student loans. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, and that's what it is. Mm-hmm. It's that going back to like, you have a system that you've built basically, yes, layered up, right? And we've said, hey, you know what? Then therefore, when you have this system, and then we can dive into more into why you need student loans or what have you, right? And really what we started diving into also after that was, what's fascinating about this is that the cost of learning, because of technology, is going down. The cost of education is going up. Yep. Mm-hmm. And that's a problem, right? And so as these systems we start recognizing how we built over these systems, eventually something's going to have to start cracking, right? And Christina, you and I were talking about the book, is it Cast?
Cast, yeah.
Right? And she talks about also the structural breaking of things, right? So yeah, you can have this great house and everything, but when you realize that, hey, you're building it on top of these structures that are not very stable, don't be surprised, if in a decade or two, something happens with your house, right? No matter how beautiful and painted and everything you have, you're building over structures. So same thing happens with technology. So as you're implementing technology, as you're progressing science, what are you building it on top of? Right. And so we need to be very thoughtful of that too. And also what role does technology and science help us also understand our systems too, right? We were talking about that earlier too. COVID was a huge eye-opening experience for a lot of folks on, oh yeah, the technology experience is very different in certain communities, right? Just to assume that we could all just go online in the 2020s was a very dangerous assumption for a lot of communities. And so certainly, so yes, absolutely, the structures that we build our institutions matter today more than ever.
And you now have made me think about some of the things. I think so. Where Jaime said that at times is governed not by science, as Demetrius said, it's never been governed by science. The interesting part is, though, it was also not supposed to be governed by beliefs, right? When we talk about this experiment, the United States of America, it was, as we were taught, at least, was supposed to have been about freedom from religious persecution. It was supposed to be about having the opportunity and the ability to believe whatever it is that you do believe and still be considered a full-fledged citizen in this country with equal rights, equal protection under the law, etc. And that the challenge is that those lines are getting blurred. And then to your point, Eric, about the foundation, science. So when you talk about beliefs, my sister's a scientist, we're engineers. I happen to be the type of person that believes that science and my spiritual beliefs can coincide. They can coexist. But if you don't believe that to be the case, and you only lean whichever way, if you only lean on science or you only lean on your beliefs, they're both problematic. And leaning on your beliefs is especially problematic because everybody has and is entitled to have different beliefs, and you shouldn't believe that your beliefs supersede somebody else's. So,
and the thing about science, and we're going to go into when technology fails, but the thing about science, those of us who studied science, is that it's always perfecting.
Yes,
it's never perfect. The whole thing about the scientific experiment, like when it was COVID, it was like we live in a scientific experience right now. We got a hypothesis that we think this is going to work, and then you test that hypothesis, and if it doesn't work, you figure out, okay, so what worked, what didn't work, and then you create a new hypothesis. And you start over and you continue. Science is it's a constantly perfecting thing, right? So now that, okay, we got the human genome map. So we always let's do this whole thing with sickle cell. They recently have okay, now we're going to have this treatment using this CRISPR technology. And I've been following this because I too have a genetic condition that, we can go in and it is going to cut out that DNA sequence, and then then you won't have it anymore, right? You won't have the issue with sickle cell. And so there are people who had to volunteer to do this, right? Because again, science is constantly perfecting. But once we've mapped the human genome, once we have your DNA sequence and we know where it falls on your DNA sequence, now we can pair up this technology to it. And so it's starting with sickle cell, but it could possibly be a treatment for any number of genetic disorders, right? The technology has been there for a while. Everything with everybody's on the Ozempic and the Mounjaro and whatever, that technology has been there a while. The GLP drugs, they've been there for a while. They haven't been used for this reason for a while. Right. And so, because again, like you said, we got to test it in that bell curve and to see, we got to make sure we're not killing a bunch of people, right? For the human experience. Right. And so there's a lot of technology that's out there and that is available in not just in the healthcare space, but in every space, in every aspect of our lives, that it's way ahead of where we are. And it's certainly way ahead of where our belief systems are. And so we have to challenge ourselves to try to catch up. At least that's what I think.
Okay. Well, thank you for that.
That's
Well,
okay.
we only have like 10 minutes, so that's why we got to move along.
Well, then let's talk. Okay, so then we were going to talk about when technology fails, right?
Yeah.
Because I think we've already been talking about technology and the human experience a lot. We've been tying it together. So first, let me say, define the human experience for us, Eric.
Yeah, for me, the human experience is, the premise of why I believe, going back to this, right, that we're here on this planet is really to expand the human condition, right, and extend what it is to be human and discover what it is to be human. And I personally do believe that today in the 2020s probably looks very different than what it was in the 1980s, and probably was very different earlier than that. We've been talking about also how others looked at us differently as well in this. But I do believe that that's the promise of technology, is to really extend what it is to be human. Technology is simply just a tool, no different than what a hammer was not too long ago, no different than some other type of tool that just simply expanded what it was to be human at that time. And so what gets me really excited about having these conversations today in the 2020s is that, yeah, my perspectives have changed, have evolved, but I still go back to that little kid in the 7th grade that his world was unlocked because of the role that I could play. And now I see it in my children as well, and seeing the world that they're going to be able to inherit. But I also see the world moving extremely fast. And a good friend of mine, Sterling Hawkins, he has this quote that says, "The slowest rate of change you're ever going to feel is today." And that feels uncomfortable. That feels really uncomfortable. But if we're able to focus really on what it is to be human today and what it is to be human tomorrow, if we ground ourselves in that, it was actually through having my kids in Montessori that helped me ground myself in with that perspective. The world could be changing at the pace that's changing, but you'll find your place in this world. And so my role as not only a speaker, but as an advisor, as a consultant, is to work with not only those organizations, but sometimes those individuals on a one-on-one basis, and help them, navigate these changes, but really focus on what it is to be human today, and build that human experience for tomorrow.
All right. I love that. There was this series on it was HBO at the time, and then it became HBO Max. Now it's just Max. Child, wherever it is, you can find it, called Years and Years. If you
Years and Years,
haven't
okay.
watched that, Years and Years.
I'll check it out.
And it talks, it was a British family, but it starts in 2019 and it brings this family forward by 15 years. And the technology and how it impacts the family, and there's so many implications for us today, and how it impacts their experience of one another, how it impacts their experience. And it's a lot of different kind of
That's amazing.
human scenarios. But the whole, okay, this is going to be your phone soon, right? They have you're going to be able to do like this and call somebody up,
Yeah.
and from your hand, and the implanting of the chips in being able to compute things in your brain, like all of this. These are things that are happening in real time right now, right? Technology. But what does it mean for how we relate to one another?
Yeah.
What does it mean for those who can afford or not afford, the have not in technology? Like, there's so many things that it impacts. And then what happened when it fails? So what happened when technology fails? And we saw 2 big failures this week in technology, that had cascading impact. So you tell us about the Google failure. Many of you know about the AT&T outage and people's phone being on SOS, not being able to text, not being able to get on Wi-Fi. So what happened as these technology advances, and then if technology fails us? How does that impact the human experience when technology fails?
No, I love these examples. Actually, I love even this headline. I mean, you could have this headline every Sunday night. I mean, there's always going to be examples of this. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need to stop this, but what's fascinating about this, when we dive into this conversation, is let's talk about the Google example. Google, just like many other companies, are developing they're starting to release new products with AI on them. We've been talking about AI for years if we were surrounded in the tech sector. And we've also been talking about the role that AI has in discrimination as well, right? That there's been a lot of AI platforms that have discriminated, mostly against people of color. And I remember vividly having this conversation in 2016 with students and saying, yeah, this is what happens. We need to recognize that this is here, but it could be improved, right? It could be improved by addressing the systems, addressing the biases, et cetera, et cetera. And that's for a different conversation. But this was just a reality that we knew that sometimes this massive scale implementation of AI tools does happen. And so when Google released their new update to, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's called Gemini, it was a prompt to image feature that they had. And on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken, on Wednesday morning, some folks started trending saying, hey, I'm really trying to get, an image of a white person, and I'm struggling to do that. And they would see these different prompts that they were trying to figure out how to get, an image of a white person. And then people just start piling up on this, and they're like, wow, we can't get it either. Like, what's going on? And by the afternoon, Google basically, shut the product down and brought it down and apologized and said, yeah, you know what? Because most of the prompts were around historical figures. And what Google was showing was, basically people of color representing these historical figures, right? Which was inaccurate. And there was even some jokes of saying, wow, maybe this was like the Hamilton cast, right? The like founding fathers in Hamilton, et cetera, et cetera. So they went all over the place. But in the afternoon when they shut it down, what I found fascinating was we've been talking about discrimination in AI for years. There's like books, there's movies on this. And we've still had most of these systems still out there. In a matter of 10 hours, this thing was shut down. And more likely there'll be an update probably starting either already this weekend or if not soon. And so what I thought was fascinating about this was how that experience, right, of someone that, for example, when I read this, I was like, oh yeah, this happens. We've known this. Like it's part of the product creation. And it will get better. Like it's fixable. Like it's okay. Like the world is not empty, because we've had these conversations in our communities. But just the fact that it was the way it was raised, the way it was responded to, the way it was saying, hey, you know what? We apologize. We're sorry. Like I was like, wow, I don't remember hearing these apologies back in 2016, 2017. We were having these, but okay, cool. Maybe we've grown up as a sector and we're ready to tackle some of these issues, because AI is in the forefront. Socially, culturally, the year of 2023 became the year of AI. Even though most of us in the tech sector, we were talking about this for years, and not only saying that it's here already, but how do you prepare our communities for this reality that it's going to be exponential change? And I'll wrap up with this. And again, we don't know the reasons why Google launched this. Maybe there'll be a case study in the future about this. But because things are moving as fast as they're moving, it wouldn't surprise me at all that how Google decided to deploy the state of this product at the state that it was also a response to the competition moving as fast as it's moving. Because today, when you are like 2 weeks behind, you are step function behind, right? When OpenAI says, I have a text to video, feature now that's coming out soon, and there's other companies that still can't do text to photo, then you're just going to respond with like, okay, we're so behind. Let's just put whatever you got. Let's go. And there you go. The implications of that now are compounded because of this, right? So it'll be really interesting to see. I think it's gonna be a fascinating case study to see how this continues to progress. There's a ton of tools that are gonna be coming out in these coming months. So how we navigate not only discrimination, but bias in these tools, I think is gonna be the conversation for 2024.
Well, personally, I think it was a hack. It is February. I'm serious. I think it was. Okay, I think someone did that on purpose, and maybe it wasn't a hack. Maybe it was somebody within that company who've been having those conversations, like you said, for a very long time, and they wanted to say, you know what? It's Black History Month, so we're gonna make George Washington Black. We're gonna make Thomas Jefferson Black. We're gonna make all it. So while you're doing your searching, because again, AI is just you put in a prompt and it generates something, right?
Yeah.
Somebody put code behind that. That's what I think happened. I think somebody said, you know what, it's Black History Month. We've been telling them about this discrimination. We've been telling them about, because I know I've had people, okay, Google leader, and then a whole bunch of men show. If you Google leader, men show up. The women don't usually show up, right? I think somebody did that on purpose, but at least that's just me. And Google's never going to say we had an employee do that on purpose.
Well, we talked about before here.
They probably fired that person.
Professional hairstyles and things like that. When you Google professional hairstyles or unprofessional hairstyles, typically it's Black people with dreads or with curls or what have you. So this has been an ongoing issue. I mean, Google just say all they see is the Blacks. That's it. They see the Blacks.
Like Donald Trump. The life was so right. All I see is the Blacks out there. So
yeah, and don't get me wrong. Google has progressed a lot in this conversation, right? I mean, even how they've designed the Google Pixel, like there's a lot of product inclusion in their work. But I think this is just a response to, again, this is my personal opinion. I think it's just a response to the accelerated pace of these changes that more than likely. I'll be fascinated to see the Q&A and the quality control in these products as they're deploying them at the rate of the report.
Inclusion, right? And so as we've seen these attacks on DEI over the last few months, weeks, years, but this past year specifically, that's where this conversation, talking about the human experience, this is where diversity, equity, and inclusion is about the human experience and is not about this quote unquote reverse racism thing. In order for these products to be better, they need diverse voices, they need diverse experiences, they need diverse education. They need to be able to think about things from a perspective that everybody if everybody has the same sort of experience, looks the same, feels the same, believes the same, right? Then you don't make the best possible product. And that's the part that has just been fascinating to me. We've allowed the diversity, equity, and inclusion conversation to only be about race and gender, when it is about how does a person who is hearing impaired experience some of these technologies? How is a person who has diminished sight experience these technologies? How does a person who perhaps speak English isn't their first language, how do they experience certain products and certain interfaces or what have you? And so that's where I think we have allowed this DEI conversation. I know I'm going on, but you used the word inclusion, and that's what jumped out at me. We've allowed this DEI conversation to be hijacked when diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging make us better because it makes our technology better.
Yeah, and the technology, the products that we're deploying today, the barrier of entry for our customers is connectivity. And so when we talk about 4 billion people connected to the internet today and 1 billion more by 2030, yes, we should be very intentional with how we're creating products and services for the individuals that will possibly have access to our brand, that maybe 30, 40 years ago, it was basically, where can my 18-wheeler reach? That's no longer the case. And so YouTube is probably the second largest revenue generator for Google. And so you're seeing all these different just product lines that are being designed and these different sectors that are built around the infrastructure of the internet. And so how you build intentionally with communities in mind is really not only what's going to make you a better product, to your point, Christina, is actually going to not only make you a product, but it's probably going to reach your customers in a much more meaningful way, in a much more efficient way as well.
And let's be crass, it's more profitable. Right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, businesses are in business to make money, right? And it's more profitable because the more people you reach and you can give them an experience that they are comfortable, that they are familiar, that they feel that they are a part of, they're going to invest in it over and over and over again.
Yes.
And so that's the crass, cynical side of it. However, back to Jaime's question, we are in a place right now where we are we are going further and further back into these pocketed and siloed systems, right? Based on beliefs and not really seeing the fullness of what that human experience can be with the interface of technology by having everyone represent. I was just even thinking about the, like you were talking about, people who sight impaired, vision and hearing, whatever, but also, I mean, people that have traumatic brain injury, elderly people who are, who may be having some different memory issues, like how technology is going to change people who have memory issues is going to be fascinating.
Yeah,
So-
individual. Let me. I would love to dive into the perspective of the pockets. So the pockets are absolutely a reality, but they're also a reality because of the incentive systems that sometimes we have around these technologies around creating those pockets for us.
Yes.
My ability to go and engage and learn about someone that has a different vision experience, audible experience, is simply me doing some type of search or extending my ability to go and learn that, right? That's my barrier today to doing that, right? But it starts with me. If it doesn't start with me, then yes, those pockets will start being built around me, and I'll just be surrounded by basically the echo chamber that I want to hear. But our ability to recognize that we are in an echo chamber is the beginning of it. I still remember vividly, we were working in the same company with Christina. I remember the very first year that I was here. I didn't know a lot of people. I was brand new to the city. I was brand new to the industry, but wanted to learn. But I also saw myself forming myself or becoming a leader in this company. And one of the best ways I knew how to learn about the employees that I get to work with was actually employees resource groups. And so I just intentionally started going to all these employee resource groups meetings. Now, employee resource groups are typically the communities that are sponsored around our diversity and inclusion efforts that we have, right? So we have our Latino ERGs, we have our Black ERGs, we have our Indian ERGs, we have our women ERGs, we have multiple ERGs. So I was very fortunate. I got to work in a big site, so I had multiple ERGs. But one of the things that I was just very intentional with was like, hey, I don't know what it is to be a woman in tech. And I'll never know what it is to be a woman in tech. But I could go and learn a little bit more today than I did know yesterday. And the best way I knew how to do that at that point in time was through the employee resource groups. And so, yes, sometimes I was the only male in that room. And yes, I got sometimes some eyes like, hey, are you just here for the free lunch? Like, what's going on? Right. But to a certain extent, I was like, no, I just want to learn. I want to be of service to this work. I want to just learn, because if I'm going to be a leader in these organizations, I'm not going to be a leader of just Erics, right? I'm going to be a leader of a multitude of individuals. And I remember vividly, we would have even women conferences around the country, and I was like, hey, I'll just fly out there and just like, because we were invited, it was open to everyone, but it was about women topics, women speakers, and yes, men were invited so we could learn. And I remember encouraging some of my male colleagues saying, hey, we should all go and be supportive. Like, hey, why would we do that? Like, you shouldn't go to that. And I remember just saying, no, like we're all invited. Like, our colleague, she's a female and she's the only female on our team. We should go and just be supportive. And so I think sometimes just encouraging yourself to, hey, and again, don't get me wrong, I'm not, we started off the conversation saying we're always a work in progress. I'm still a work in progress. But recognizing that, I think going back into this technological areas of work in progress, how do we become intentional with doing that work and using technology as a tool to do that work? And I think if we're able to utilize it in a very thoughtful way, not only it's going to give us a better understanding of our communities and our neighbors and our humanity, it could prepare us to have a much more empathetic world as well.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a drop the mic moment right there.
I think so too.
You all can follow Eric. You can go to Eric J. Let me put the J in there. EricJRodriguez.com. You can learn more about the work that he's doing. He is launching a new podcast soon called The Human Experience, so you can learn more about his podcast. And if you
the future of human experience.
Oh, yes, the future of human experience, as our show is titled today. but you also can then if you are if you're looking for a speaker to have this type of conversation or dialogue or bring this to your workplace, your organization, to a school near you, then consider going to ericjrodriguez.com and connecting with him there. I think that it's an important conversation that we need to continue to have. Sister, any closing comments?
Well, first, is it the future of the human experience or is it the future of human? I want to make sure we get this right.
Yeah, no, you got it. The future human experience. And I laughed because we went through like a week of figuring out, I was like, is it where we're going to put the D? So yeah, it's the future of human experience. Thank you.
Future of human experience. Well, like I said at the top of the hour, if there's anybody who I feel confident about talking about the future of human experience, specifically as it relates to being a global citizen and sharing our shared humanity, then I feel confident in it being you. Eric, you are a wonderful leader and a great speaker, and all of your life's experiences, because we haven't even touched on your work in education and all of those things. Yeah. All of your life experiences have prepared you for this moment. And I see just amazing things in your future. I'm so happy to know you and be connected to you, because you are, again, a very authentic person who always checks in, stays in touch, and you don't do it because you have anything to gain. At least not from me. Maybe there's some other folks, but not from me. You just do it because of the quality of your humanity. So I'm so happy that you were a guest tonight. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. I hope that you'll come back, because once your podcast just blows up, we'll probably have to get on the calendar or something. Hopefully you will charge us in family rates.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I know this space is not only important for your relationship, right, as sisters. So I feel privileged and honored to have an opportunity to share this space with you today and your listeners too. I'm really excited to hear the feedback and the conversation to continue until next week.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I thank you. I thank you, because we need to have more of these conversations. And for me, I think one of the key takeaways, and as it relates to everything we talked about, whether it's politics or it's technology or any of it, we're still having human experiences every day, right? We're still in it. And if we can look to recognize, appreciate our shared humanity and lead with that in how we think, in how we formulate our beliefs, in how we legislate, in how we advance technologies, right? If we think about the humanity and the human use first.
Yes.
And what does it mean for humanity? Man, what a world that would be.
That's the promise. That's the promise, and that's the work.
That's a promise, and that's the work. So with that being said, you two hold the line, wave bye to everybody, and we say good night.
Thank you. Bye. Good night.